And here we have the Tetractys of the Decad. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. And the Tetractys was worshipped as the fountainhead or structure of all reality by Pythagoras. And if you think back all the way to that time period when the concept of a thing that is purely abstract, purely inferred from the world in an abstract form rather than obtained through observation, Pythagoras' observance of how ratio and how number relationships behave revealed what appeared to be a transcendental, fundamental architecture to the universe. And Pythagoras, and Plato after him, Parmenides, the Neoplatonic philosophers, and indeed the very framework upon which Christianity and much of Judaism ended up hosting itself, had this notion of a world that was created through stages of emanation and progressively became more and more alienated from its original source. And one of the stories brought out of the Gnostic milieu to account for this, and out of Plato, is the story of the Demiurge. And the Demiurge is an architect, a deity who emerges from the limitless with the purpose of architecturing a framework of reality. And the Demiurge, in a sense, intagliates or carves out the first order plenum using chambers or zones. In Jewish Kabbalistic tradition, there's an idea of a tzimtzum or contraction, where these zones kind of open up in the body of this fundamental primordial plenum, and these absentings are the chambers through which human understanding flows. Now, not everyone holds to a emanationistic account, and if you go all the way to Asia and you look at how philosophies emerged there, you'll find that Asian philosophies did not tend to create this same kind of chambered dualism or this kind of alienated account of the genesis of the world. This seems to be something that runs in tandem with alphabets. And of course, Hebrew and Greek are some of the very earliest alphabets. And I heard it said to me once, the alphabet was only invented once. Aleph bet, right? Alphabet. It is a specific sequence of sounds that are given the role of reconstructing through fragments the meanings of all the words, which supposes that there was perhaps a pre-alphabetic state in which those words were fundamentally inherent and did not require the reconstruction through arbitrary sounds. And this gets, of course, into the discussion that I raised in the path on the other side of the tree of life, the path of Zayin, the lovers, and remembering that right now we're here. I know this says Va and this is Hey, but reality is that we've used the proximized tree. We're operating a little differently. So this here is Hey, the emperor. This is where we are right now. And over here, the lovers in their Garden of Eden. We talked about how language and the tzimtzum and the alienation from primordiality through fragmentative knowledge acquisition We talked about that. But here we have the architect himself, if you will, of the universe as a nameable chamber of meanings, if you will. And the emperor is the demiurge. The emperor is the fourth card in the tarot, and it also has He, the fifth letter, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But so naturally represents this tetractys, this bridge between 1 and 10, and there's other things here, right? So you've got 1 and 10. The bridge is 1, 2, 3, 4 levels, but it's threefold. And there are 9 actual chambers, right? So if you look at, I have these notes here. If you look here, we've got 9 chambers of the tetractys. So that's a foundational number. For those of you who have a Lo Shu diagram, I would say it's a good time to get it out and maybe fit in some of those images that you made into these chambers and see what you see. Something worth noting is this can be oriented both ways, this framework. And if you put them together, they form the Magin star. But if you just look at it like this, you've got 6 upright and 3 downward. So it's a 2 to 1 ratio of upright to downwards. And over here, it's a 2 to 1 ratio of downwards to upwards, if you turn it around. So that's very interestingly like the yin-yang, right? The yin contains the yang contains the yin. And I want you to consider how this function of giving order, of giving name, of giving designation and boundary, and ratio even, to all things, how it may have emerged as the architecture of human consciousness, as we began to be beings who distinguished ourselves from the continuum in which we were embedded. And this is where we can talk about the Father God. This is where we can talk about the demiurge. This is where we can talk about Tetragrammaton. And clearly, this card is intimately related to Tetragrammaton. And remember, here's this picture of the Tetragrammaton. And there we go. It is shaped like a human being. And of course, this idea that we are made in God's image brings us to the suggestion that there is an architectural likeness between us, human beings, and this body of wisdom associated with God. I do want to talk about structure, and I do want to talk about relationships to the God concept as a anthropomorphic being. I remember Robert Anton Wilson made the joke that you could, if you were trying to describe God in biological terms, right? In scientific biological terms, he would be classed as an astronomical vertebrate. No, sorry, a gaseous vertebrate of astronomical heft, which I always thought was funny. This is, of course, the image of the bearded, powerful, masculine, anthropomorphic God. This is not the same as the concept of the Tao or the concept of the Sophia. Remember, the demiurge is said to have emerged out of the Sophia, out of the limitless plenum of wisdom. And in the Valentinian Gnostic tradition, which Philip Dick was highly influenced by, this being, called the Yaldabaoth, created the universe and then went mad. And went mad and said, you can only worship me, you can only worship me. this essentially this functionary, this geometer. You can see it in Blake as well, the image of the Ancient of Days, the image of the geometer god, as a being, as a demiurgic being who crafts this world out of number and ratio and stasis. And of course the Pythagorean problem is what's called the Pythagorean comma. There is full adherence to a rational system does not create the most beautiful harmonies. Inserting a little bit of a deviation from perfect ratios creates greater beauty than sticking with them totally in music. And there is, of course, the indivisible remainders. There are the irrational numbers, which Pythagoras incidentally killed people over. Right? People talked about it, and they revealed that the square root of -2, the square root of 2 was an irrational number, and they were thrown off the boat and drowned. So the revelation of imperfection's role in the fabric of things. So there is with the emperor this incredible power of perfectionistic, enclosing, boundary creating, hierarchicalizing, total stasis or homeostasis producing heft. And for obvious reasons, not everybody's comfortable with this or with the Hierophant. Look at this, okay? So remember, we're building up these kind of forays into the supernal, and we spent time on this side of the tree where building up to understanding. We have Lamed, Justice, we have Zayn, the lovers, and Chet, the chariot. And so this has a kind of more feminine vibe to it. It's pretty darn intense, but it's got a feminine vibe. On this side, however, you have a powerfully masculine vibe. You have the hermit, the emperor, and the Hierophant forming this, I want to say, this strut. It's like there's these two struts, and there's going to be a girder laid across them. But this one here, this strut, which leads from wisdom, Chokmah, to Chesed, mercy, is the emperor, and is the pinnacle of masculinity in the tarot. I had someone I was reading for, I got this card and I talked about it as the pinnacle of masculinity, and of course she said, "Oh yeah, it must be the highest card in the tarot." And I said, "No, absolutely not. The tarot does not end at the patriarchal father god image, although it incorporates it. But it goes beyond to an understanding, as we'll see, of a divinity that is beyond gender as we understand it. But for now, we have the role of the demiurge. And of course, this is quite a contested space in the tarot. So much so that Crowley, and I don't have time to totally go over it in absolute detail. I've talked about it before in other videos. But Crowley's work with the emperor is especially interesting because by swapping the letters He and Tzadi, a number of things are achieved. Right? You can see he's got Tzadi as the emperor, which is the first letter of Tzadik. I understand what he's doing, and in a sense is undermining the demiurgic potency, undermining it. And he actually wouldn't hold it up here. He'd place it way down here. And here's where the star 17 is going to be. So he's got his whole different thing. I don't think it achieves what it sets out to achieve, or maybe it does, but it's not what I am looking to accomplish. Even though in many other respects I'm quite happy with Crowley's discoveries, abracadabra, 93s, all that kind of stuff. I'm very, very keen on and quite happy with it. But this is something that it resonates with this idea of dismantling the girders of the soul, dismantling, deconstructing the demiurge. And of course, this seems very appealing, where you've got this corrupt power. Why don't we tear it apart? And then you have other people on the other side, no, because it's divine, and you can't do that. So you've got this division. You've got these people who are worshiping it, and these people who are seeking to destroy it. A bit like people's feelings towards government. And I have a slightly different take on this. I would say that this dualism is like being in a Chinese finger trap. Where they call those puzzles, where you can't release your fingers by pulling away. You have to bring things close and then disengage it. And so what I am going to encourage in the relation to the emperor is neither worship of the emperor as a god, nor destruction of the emperor. Because I would say, if you were to follow, you look at any case where a government has become corrupt and then been utterly dismantled, that it's not a pleasant thing that happens. And the vacuum created by the removal of infrastructure is a very ugly space. It's fine for young anarchists to call for the smashing of the state, but when all infrastructure collapses and anyone on a respirator in a hospital is going to become collateral damage, the total removal of the architecture is as undesirable as the total rigidity of the architecture. So what do? We sublate it. What do I mean by sublate? I mean we understand its function in a way as an administrator of staged development and of the staging of moments and of understanding, but we recover the state that preceded it on the other side of it. And how do we do this? We do this by seeing through it. We do this by encountering the demiurge not as a god or as a malevolent structure. So neither the anthropomorphic nor the Gnostic anti-theistic, but rather as essentially a recipe, a set of instructions for the construction of divine understanding, which ultimately is something that we participate in. The idea of a God that we worship outside ourselves is something that we're alienated from, and so naturally we want to remove it. But what I'm talking about is a sublimation, an owning of the fact that, as Jethro Tull said, God was created in our image. And there is, I don't want to get into this idea of we are gods, that's so juvenile, and people go on about it. And just exacerbate the dichotomies, the dualities. I'm talking about a path through which the word God is no longer required. It no longer is needed. It's not that God is destroyed or God is triumphant. It's that beyond the gate of a reified anthropomorphic creator deity is a domain of intuition and divine awareness that interconnects everything and that suffuses the demiurge. So the demiurge, from the point of view of dualism, creates these great opacities where we are these great dualities, this almost Nietzschean dualism. But from the point of view of an expressive capacity of the universe to establish limits within to which to work. Its purpose, its reality is that the demiurge in a way is the key to our recovery of the state of divine awareness, neither through worship nor destruction, but through contemplation of it and through making it transparent, allowing the demiurge to dissolve back into the Sophia, to allow a return of this potency, this patriarchal masculine projection onto the world, to be reabsorbed back into the primordial. And how do we do that? We do that through abiding in awareness and through walking these paths with neither attachment nor disinterest, and like a Buddhist meditator, letting the thoughts arise and fall and appreciating their unfolding, because there's a lot more going to happen after this particular path on the tree. But I want to encourage you to let the Emperor play this role. Let the Emperor be where the Emperor is, and don't feel that prevents you from going further. And then you'll find, and this is one of the features of the proximized tree, that it becomes a support for a greater understanding. And my ultimate belief is that the various names of gods in the monotheistic traditions and the various hierarchies and the Neoplatonic hypostatic systems and stuff that you get from people like Plotinus and Proclus and so on, they become technologies of thought that, when allowed to be that, are profoundly supportive of clarity, sanity, composure. In a sense, we metabolize them, we eat them. They become architectures of our presence without being malevolent, or without being our enemy or our benefactor. Nobody would say a bridge is our benefactor. It is our support. Nobody would worship a bridge. We would cross a bridge. And in a way, crossing a bridge is worshiping a bridge. If you worship a bridge, it's like you wouldn't cross it. And that's kind of what the Emperor is like. People go up and they worship the bridge. And they're like, oh, I can't cross this bridge. We have to worship it. Okay, well, that's silly. Or they go up to that bridge is, it's a false god. Let's destroy it. And they destroy the bridge. What I'm talking about with the Emperor is you crossed the bridge. And then it's no longer a question as to whether it's divine or infernal. That dualism is absurd. But the Tetractys, the architecture of order is not something to be worshipped or condemned. It's something to be incorporated into the body of the design of our extended consciousness. I mean, and I'm thinking here, Buckminster Fuller, don't. When a system is corrupt, design a better one that makes it obsolete. Don't oppose forces, use forces. So I would disagree with this approach of deconstructing the bridge as much as I would disagree with the approach of worshiping and anthropomorphizing it. We will cross the bridge, and so appreciate it. And observe your reactions to it. Particularly if you have had the experienced the negative effects of patriarchal society, and also if you experience the positive effects. observe both as you cross this bridge and realize that in this way we're sort of liberated from it. The more we do battle with it, the more the disordered forms or caliphothic shells of this being, this reality of order and proportion manifests, and we don't want that. We want to dissolve those shells and move beyond. Consume the demiurge. So, let's talk a little bit more. 4 and 5 is interesting, because this is a card that is of course 4. It's related to Tetragrammaton. It is also related to 5 because He is 5, and in that respect, 4 gives us the tetrahedron. The tetrahedron is interesting because it's a dual object with its self-dual. Within the tetrahedron is another tetrahedron and another and another and another. Just as you can see this this triangle here, within it is another and another and another, going on forever in what's called Sierpinski fractal, right? You can do this with all the sub-triangles too. I encourage you to try. This is a very emperor kind of thing to do, is play with Sierpinski triangles. The fivefold nature is a result of taking the unity of the whole, of the fourfold set, and then adding that to the set. So you add the unity of 4 to 4, and you get 5. This is in math known as the successor function. And we see it really beautifully, well, between Kesed and Geburah, right? We talked about this already. But now in the Emperor, which kind of subsumes both. And so we have the Emperor-style pyramid is a pyramid of a square base and 4 sides. This is a Cheops-style pyramid, and the pentagram suggests it. And of course, a pentagram encased by a pentagon has the look of one of these pyramids, and if you put 2 together, you get this octahedral diamond shape. If you can't do this, I suggest you go back and look at more of the videos. In week 6, we talked about this extensively. This is a return to much of what we did at the very early stages. And in that respect, there's a few other things to talk about. The concept of the table. The emperor requires any empire requires a kind of establishing of a table, of a space with a boundary, and so for this reason, altar magic can be found in 4s and 10s, and of course because the Tetractys relates 4 to 10, you can see why. So what is altar magic? Altar magic is the clearing of a table, and you know what? Your desk is an altar. Right? Any table is an altar. It's a flat place upon which objects may be placed or removed. And if it is level and flat, then it serves as an analog for existence and of the space of creation. We bring things into it, we take them out of it, and we move them around on the table. And so maintaining an altar, of course, is an act of, because it's a physical object, it's an act of continuous return and devotion, because an altar is subject to inertia. You put the fruit on the altar, it rots. You burn the incense, it creates mess. You have to maintain an altar, but the symbolic act of maintaining an altar is feeds back into the higher or invisible work that happens with consciousness itself. So the emperor is, in a sense, the altar of order, of the kingdom, of the government, of the soul. So think about your altars and how you establish them, because the ordered altar translates through sympathetic magic into the ordered mind. Sacred geometry, octahedrons, tetrahedrons. We looked at in the week on the chariot how the tetrahedra will connect and connect to an octahedron, stellating it and produce the Merkaba shape, which is what we know as Metatron's cube. Highly important sacred geometrical strict space, which of course very much is about this composure of the soul, this demiurgic architecture or potency, which we are going to build with. And I am going to encourage you to use it, much as we would use any architectural principle. And we will go beyond it. We are talking about a philosophy that incorporates both interior architectured spaces and exterior natural spaces, because at the end of the day, even though we want to oppose the urban to the rural, to the artificial to the natural, those things collapse, right? Human beings are part of the natural system. Things that humans create are, by extension, part of the natural system. We have introduced a problematic inertia into the equation by opposing our creations to it in our own minds, but they don't. And once we resolve that, a great deal will change in the human psyche. Once we learn that our creations are not artificial, it's nothing artificial, except that it is of artifice, but artifice is our natural power. So how do we plug that back in so that the demiurge is no longer an extraneous kind of a sore thumb, but it is another function of our natural participation in the universe. If you were to say the relationship between 4 and 5, and they come together and they form 9, of course we saw the 9 chambers of the tetractys with these triangles, but also the 9 chambers of the Lo Shu. But if you wanted to connect the spheres 4, 5, and 9, you would get this, which is an interesting thing to think about, because it shows just how much of our reality is given form by this relationship. The 4 tools, the 4 magical tools, the 4 suits, the 4 worlds, right? Fire, water, air, and earth. Wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. The intellect, we'll say the intent, the imagination, the intellect, and the body. And actually there's a 5th, and there's a 5th world called the primordial world, Kadmon. And there's a 5th element, which you can symbolize in different ways. Some people do as a lamp, some people as the conch. But the 5th in the tarot is almost always tacit. If there's a 5th element to the 4 suits, it's the trumps as a whole. It's not because, of course, if you make it another suit amongst the suits, then you have 5 suits. Well, then what's the 6th? And if you make the 6th explicit, what's the 7th? Again, the successor function comes in. So a lot of this of understanding numerology or understanding numbers in this sacred way is that they are dimensions. We aren't compelled to move on to the next number. In fact, we should stick around. But when I'm in 4, it's from position 5. When I'm in 5, it's from position 6. When I'm in 3, it's from position 4. So there's always this referent, the self. And no matter how many times we eject it and make it explicit, it'll still be there as the next number in the series. So always know that +1 is present, but you don't have to make it explicit. In fact, in order to dwell in anywhere in any one of these dimensions, say the dimension of 5-ness, you have to be doing so from the 6th and not coding it. And similarly, to dwell in the dimension of 4, you have to be doing so from the 5th and not coding it. So we learn to dwell in these spaces by the freedom we have to make explicit or implicit this position from which we observe. The emperor then is taking charge, setting boundaries, clearing the table. It's Ares, so it's beginning the series. It's establishing the domain. It is polar to the star, so that's a very interesting feature. Is that the polar opposite of the emperor is the star? This is where Crowley got into swapping the two letters. Why? The star seems to represent an austere point of hope or inspiration, and the emperor is an ideal. The creator of the universe, if you will, is an inaccessible pinhole, if you will, that is proposed to be far above the world and beyond. We look up to the star in the same way we look up to the monarch, in one particular point of view. I'm not suggesting that we alienate ourselves. Perhaps what I'm suggesting is that we all attain our sovereignty. We neither worship sovereignty from afar, nor do we destroy sovereignty, but we claim sovereignty. And what would a world be like if everyone was a king? This is the Pope is the connection, right, between heaven and earth, the great bridge. And the Discordians, they claim everyone's a Pope. Thelemites claim that everyone can be a sovereign. And so I think that that's the way to approach this and to become worthy of it. That's the other thing. You just don't just claim it. You have to rise to the majesty, if you will, and that's what takes the work. It's not just saying I'm God, I'm the king. It's just say that, be it, and that's the trick. That's the real challenge. This is a very challenging crossing. This crossing of the abyss. This part of the tree. It's on an order of magnitude higher than anything we've encountered before, but we've built the necessary stages up to it. So obviously, because you're in this triangle here, where we've got the Hierophant mediating from Chokmah to Tiphereth, the Hermit mediating from Chesed to Tiphereth, and the Emperor mediating from Chokmah to Chesed, you've got these three very powerful masculine figures: the Hierophant, the Hermit, and the Emperor. The Emperor is, of course, the force of order. The Hermit is the force of deep, singular contemplation. And the Hierophant is the structure of belief and learning. In the proximized system, consciousness looks up to the divine as to a great scholar rather than as to a great leader, and the leader, the architect, is in the supportive role, which is different, because normally we see this in most systems as we're looking up towards the emperor, and Hierophant is in the supporting role. We've got it differently in our system. The Hierophant and the Emperor are clearly highly connected in that without the one, you couldn't have the other. Without the sound architecture, you couldn't have the library or the cathedral. But without the stories, you could not have the love that is required to live within. You see, the demiurge requires love. There's obviously an element of fear, especially in the anthropomorphic form, where you know you better do what God says, and or else he'll whatever consign you to hell and so on. But in truth, this beyond that kind of corruption of the idea is there is love that binds it together, but there is also fear, of course, but it is the fear not of being punished, but of not. So we have pure raw chaos, which dissolves everything it touches, and love gives birth to forms. And so when we love someone, we don't consign them to chaos. We don't dissolve them. We preserve their form. When we do it pathologically, we pickle them or taxidermy them. But when we do it truly, we appreciate their form in the same manner that consciousness appreciates a thought and neither tries to preserve it for forever or banish it, but just lets it be. And so that love is manifest. And so appreciating the preciousness of the flower of love. I don't want to say an object, but the loved. Appreciating the preciousness of the beloved is entangled with a fear that we would overlook that preciousness. And I think that's perhaps the appropriate reading for the fear of God. Not the fear that God will punish you, but the fear that you'll miss the point. And the point is love. So I do think the tension created between love and this appropriate kind of fear. A lot of fear is inappropriate, but there is an appropriate kind of fear that is like the tension that draws the bowstring. So the relationship between appropriate fear and love gives us a bridge into divinity and into the creative power of things. You know, the actor who is not at all afraid to go on stage is more likely to mess up big time than the actor who has that fear before going on stage but confronts it and takes it up, because that's the tension that tells us this is valuable. So I'm not talking about pathological fear or neurosis, but feeling that bowstring drawing tension that gives value and worth and energy and creative power. So that is all inherent in the emperor. Let's look at some of these images. Of course, this is a Visconti Sforza. It's a beautiful classic image of the emperor, bearded character that he is, sitting on a hexagonal platform. Here we have the Rider Waite. This is an interesting emblem. You notice how the Hierophant has the three-leveled cross, which suggests the three girders on the pillar on the Tree of Life, right? The three horizontals. This suggests actually the Ankh. It's not quite the Ankh, but it suggests this shape here, which actually connects all the Sephiroth. And we'll talk about that more next week. But it implies that the Emperor has a counterpart, which is the Empress, as we shall soon see. I sometimes think that you could rename the Emperor the Urban and the Empress the Rural. And of course, like I said before, those two things sort of dissolve, but especially if you're in Hong Kong. But the Emperor... Yeah, you can see he's sitting on the throne, and of course he's got all these mountains in the background and playing challenge and overcoming challenges. there's lots of stuff here in this hermetic deck. The Blood and Ink, the Leonora Carrington, the Tarot of the Holy Light. This orb with a cross above it, of course, definitely it shows up quite a bit. It suggests dominion, the world that has been essentially encircled from a transcendental position of power. I want to talk about, one thing about Crowley's is he's very much in the shape of sulfur, right? He's got the sign for sulfur, the crossed legs, and then the triangular body. That's the sulfur sign. So blazing power, force, passion. But I think my favorite is this one from the Carrie Yale. And this shows me something that I haven't really seen in any other emperor, but I think should be in all of them. As you see in a lot of these old Carrie Yale, these old vestigial images, he's got a court. The emperor is accompanied by a court. And, well, yeah, no kidding. Emperors are not solitary beings. Emperors are supported by a retinue of courtiers, of astrologers, and of advisors, and of military tacticians, and of chefs, and of jesters, and of royal butt wipers, and of scouts, and of minstrels, and of... The emperor is a full social body, an institution. So the emperor, we talk about command, we think about command and control and power. Really, in a sense, the secret of the emperor is delegation. And remember I talked about love. It's love that keeps the kingdom functioning. A kingdom functioning on the wrong kind of fear collapses. This is the Caligula. This is the Nero, right? Who misunderstands that it is love that that binds the empire together. Roma, spelt backwards, is amor. And that's the secret. Perhaps that's the secret name of Rome, as was proposed. That's something to look up. We won't talk about it much in this course, but legend has it there was a secret name of Rome, and one writer came up and said it's Amor. The secret name of the empire is love, and of course, because when the court loves the king, think about Arthur, think about Augustus, think about. It's not to say that they don't fear him, because obviously some people do, but the love is what overwhelms. Solomon, David, the charismatic power, the love, is what really binds the kingdom together, and it's through the delegation and the cooperation. In a fear-based empire, this starts to collapse, and this person starts to become paranoid of his, he doesn't want to get murdered by his jester or his butt wiper or whatever, right? His chefs. So the paranoia sets in and so on. There always has to be sort of a healthy balance, right? Because you don't want to be. Remember, it's 4 and 5, right? So it's peace, but also the capacity to do battle, right? If you don't have the capacity to do battle, you will be overtaken by someone who does, and is aggressive with it. The point is to be able to do battle, but not to be aggressive. That's that balance between 4 and 5. That's the ideal emperor. The ideal emperor is fully capable of going to town, but isn't initiating this. And that's that triad of 4, 5, and 6 come together. So the self that can defend itself when it needs to, can hold its peace when it needs to, and can hold the balance between those two functions. That is the key to the center of the tree, right? Severity, mercy, and beauty. Right. So this is an emperor with a full court who love him, who support him, who builds the world around him. And so in that respect, the emperor is about delegation. And it's about being surrounded by people who love you, to whom the work can be delegated, who are afraid of letting the work down. That's what afraid of letting the kingdom collapse because the kingdom is worthy. And that's the right kind of fear. And people are being afraid to do a bad job, because doing a bad job is essentially disgraceful, right? Not afraid not to piss off the emperor because you just don't know when he'll behead someone, the Joffrey kind of thing, right? That's the wrong kind of fear. That's going to destroy itself. But the loved emperor brings people together, and their fear of letting that world collapse, of not being worthy of this space, is what keeps them going. So that's where the tension comes. And as we'll see, we move on, and there are more secrets that emerge. Once this demiurgic array is in place, then we learn some new things. So thank you, and I am Dr. Peter Duchemin, and this is the Forest of Life Venus calendar, week 28 out of 32. And for those of you in my course, I will see you in the next few days. All right.